Right. Go. And we're live. Good evening and welcome to UK Crime Book Club. And I believe this is the first live that we've had of 2024. And we're delighted to be joined this evening by Tom Hindle. And Tom is going to be talking about his latest book, Murder on Lake Garda, which is out this Thursday. Actually, it's that way, isn't it? For those who haven't encountered Tom before, he's also written A Fatal Crossing and The Murder Game. So Tom will be telling us about Murder on Lake Garda, and we'll probably touch on the other two as well as we go along. So in your words, would you like to tell us about your new book, Tom?
Yeah, of course. So, hi, thank you for having me. Yes, so Murder on Lake Garda, it is a murder mystery. It's a proper whodunit in the style very much of Agatha Christie and all those great golden age murder mysteries. It's set in the present day, though. It's a contemporary novel, and Murder on Lake Garda takes us to the wedding of Lawrence, who is a hedge fund manager here in the UK, and Eva, who is an Italian influencer, and they are getting married in a ludicrously glamorous setting, as the title of the book might suggest, in a castle on Lake Garda. And it's a highly exclusive event, family and friends only. It is on a private island in the middle of the lake. And just as the bride and groom are gearing up to say their vows, a terrible scream rings across the island, and a fairly pivotal person to the ceremony turns up dead. And the chaos unfolds from there.
It certainly does, and I really love the premise of this sort of super glamorous wedding, and
thank you.
Eva and Lawrence on this private island and set on Lake Garda. What was the sort of inspiration for the book and the setting, actually?
Yeah, so my wife and I, getting on for 2 years ago now, were on holiday. We were at Lake Garda ourselves, and while we were there, we were exploring this amazing castle on the shores of the lake. I'm not sure if that's the right word, the bank of the lake, the shores of the lake. On the side of the lake, we were exploring this incredible castle in a lovely little town called Mount Chesine, and we were going around, and in one of the courtyards inside this castle, there was an incredible wedding taking place. And the castle had like a watchtower that you could climb and get this amazing view from the top of the lake and of this wedding happening down below. And I remember just we were standing up there looking down at it and was just so taken aback by this scene, the incredible architecture of the castle, the scenery of the lake beyond it, and the glamour of the ceremony below. And I remember just looking down at it and thinking, if someone was murdered right there, that would just be the best opening to a murder mystery. And I actually took a picture from the top of this watchtower. So I took a picture making sort of capture everything. And when we got back from our holiday, we got back to the UK, I emailed that picture to my agent and to my editor. And I said to them, right, chapter 1 of a new book, you are at this wedding and this character dies. I won't say who here because it's slightly spoilerific, but this person dies. And then that's the book. That's the opening to the book. What do you think? And they both replied just saying, yes, go and write this, please. And that was that, which was really fun because usually when you certainly when I'm pitching a new book, I will write a couple of pages. I'll write a couple thousand words on what the book is about and the premise and how I envisage the mystery kicking off and taking shape. But with this, it was just that picture from the top of that watchtower in Italy, and just the one-liner of, you're at this wedding and this person dies, and that is chapter 1 of the book. What do you reckon? It was slightly different, but it came to me in that way. I was actually working on a different idea at the time. I'd spent a couple of months actually working and plotting out and writing the first few thousand words of a slightly different murder mystery that was going to take place at a funeral in Yorkshire. And we went to Italy, we went on holiday, and we saw this wedding. And the plan at the time was for Murder on Lake Garda to be my 4th book. I was going to crack on with the murder at the funeral idea I was working on and come back to Lake Garda. But I just couldn't shake the idea loose. And after another month or two, I think I gave my editor a ring or sent her an email, and I said, I think I need to. Well, I think this is book 3. I think we need to drop the funeral idea and crack on with Lake Garda. And she was happy for me to do that, and off we went. But yes, it came very unexpectedly, as some of the best ideas seem to do. Yeah. And I'm really pleased with how the book has taken shape.
Yeah, I really, I think the sort of your books are they're very sort of character driven as well, aren't they? And this one is no exception. And I really
Mm.
like the books that have unlikable characters. And without giving away too many spoilers in this book, there's several.
There are
there's
one or
several
two, yeah,
characters.
yeah.
There's several characters in this book who I was like, oh, they're so annoying. But I think that's the whole thing, isn't it? Is that the more annoying they are, the more engaging they are, I think. And was that sort of when obviously when you saw the wedding, you didn't know the character, you know, you didn't know that the characters. So how did they sort of come about? Because obviously Eva's a diva.
Yes,
um,
yes, she is. Um,
and Lawrence is just yeah, Lawrence is just posh boy.
yeah. He is. Yeah,
um,
I mean the characters. So you are right. They are fairly unlikable. I think they almost need to be in a murder mystery
yeah,
because I guess you have to believe that any one of them could be a murderer.
yeah,
So yeah, you've kind of got to make them quite unpleasant in that regard. And as well, you know, with a murder mystery, you like all of your characters to have a secret or to be hiding
yeah.
something pretty nasty that will inevitably come out over the course of the book. And so again, you need them to be fairly unpleasant people for them to have some nasty secrets. But I mean, in terms of the way they come about, you know, I with all of my books, I start with a premise, so a basic what if question. So with A Fatal Crossing, it was, you know, what if a chap was found dead on a 1920s cruise liner? With Murder on Lake Garda, it was what if someone was murdered at this incredible wedding we happened to see? And I kind of reverse engineer it, and the
Mm.
characters come in that sort of way. So the first question with Murder on Lake Garda was who's getting married, and you know, who are the bride, who are the groom, who's the bride, who is the groom, and then the next question from there is who is at this wedding? You know, who would they invite? Is it just family and friends? Is it a big wedding? If it's just family and friends, who are their families? Who are their friends? Who are their acquaintances? Who do they work with? Who do they hate, and who hates them back home in England or here in Italy for Eva? So yeah, it's very much a case of reverse engineering it and just trying to work out what sort of people would be most interesting to have in this situation.
Mm.
What sort of people would you expect to have in this situation, and how can you kind of take it a step further and say, okay, who would you perhaps not expect to be here? Because that's usually a more interesting question. And who is the most sort of interesting people that could be here and could be part of this murder mystery? And usually, you know, you start to build a bit of a cast of characters from there, and the more time you spend with them, the better you get to know the relationships between them and the histories between all of them, and you can really dig into some of those relationships as you get stuck into writing the book.
And I guess as you write as well, you get to know their character, their sort of personalities, and sort of how you can sort of play with those personalities, and how people who, you know, a person who might seem quite superficial on the outside is a lot deeper on the inside, and how you can, because it's really clever. The characters are really interesting because there's lots of skeletons in the closets, which, you know, you need that, don't you, in a murder mystery? Because it, like you say, anybody could be the murderer, anybody
Hmm.
could be the victim.
Yeah.
um and did you so you did you always know who the victim and the murderer was going to be? Was that sort of pretty, when you sent that email, you knew who was going to be murdered, but did you know
I
who was going to do it?
Yeah, I absolutely knew who was going to be murdered because I remember
Yeah.
looking down once I'd sort of hit on the question of, okay, what if someone was murdered here? You know, the one of the first questions was who is the worst possible person that could be killed at this glamorous wedding? And I knew I'd hit on the right person to be killed off because when I remember going back into, you know, the office, I was still working for a PR agency at the time and talking to our office manager about this idea and saying this person gets murdered, and her response was, Tom, you absolute rotter. Like, how can you, what are you doing killing this person off? So I thought, perfect. That is exactly what the reaction I wanted. So yeah, I knew very early on who was going to be murdered, just for for dramatic value more than anything else.
Yeah.
In terms of the murderer, it came. So I was actually in the process of planning my wedding at the time. So I hit on this idea in May of 2022, and my wife and I got married in September. So we were sort of very much into wedding planning, which was actually very helpful for working out sort of the logistics of the day and who would be there, and what the sort of general thoughts and feelings surrounding preparing for a wedding and going to a wedding and getting married would be like. And I think I remember it's probably a month or two after I'd hit on the idea. We were doing some wedding prep of our own, and it's difficult to talk about getting spoilerific, but I remember just hitting on the idea of someone at this wedding who absolutely should be there, and you would expect to be at a wedding, but who is just the perfect person to commit a murder and potentially get away with it. I think that's kind of all I can say. But yeah, I hit on it a month or two after, and then once I'd hit on the idea of, okay, this particular person has to be the killer because they're just perfect, then it was a case of, okay, how do I make that work? What is their motive? Why have they done this? And that was the tricky part, to be honest.
Because there's a lot of characters in the book, isn't there? And they're really well fleshed out as well. You get to know them, and I was thinking, well, how do you sort of manage to keep a track of all these people? Because you've got obviously the bridal party and their friends, and then you've got the people who work at the castle, and then you've got people from the outside that come in for various reasons. I'm not going to say why. So you've got this whole sort of bubble of people who are, and it really lends itself to the imagination. And I guess that's probably part of what makes a good murder mystery, isn't it? Is that you're taken off in very many different directions of who you think it is. And there's the obvious ones who you think, I don't think it'll be them because that's too obvious. And then there's like, well, but maybe maybe it should be that obvious. So you definitely sort of keep the reader on their toes. And I really liked Robin, who is there
brilliant.
as I liked her, and I wasn't sure about Toby, but I really liked Robin. And they've all got secrets, haven't they? They've all got secrets.
Yeah.
But those two really don't want to be there. They're there because Lawrence is Toby's brother, and he's sort of obliged to go
to his wedding,
along. Yeah. And I just really did feel for them as a couple. I was just like, this must be. I mean, it's the most beautiful setting, isn't it? But but they're with the most vile people. You just really felt for her.
I mean, I really wanted with Robin. Robin was a funny one, kind of as a protagonist, because she, in a way, she came very quickly into being, but at the same time, it took me a while to sort of work her out. So I knew I wanted a protagonist or a narrator who was a stranger to, well, partly to this group of people, and as you say, she is there because she is the girlfriend of the groom's brother. So she is the plus one of someone who doesn't want to be there himself, because the brothers are not on good terms. So she is going in as an outsider. She doesn't know these people. She is meeting. Not only is she attending her boyfriend's brother's wedding, but she is meeting the family for the first time. Like, she meets Toby's mum, like in I think the first chapter of the book. So there's that pressure as well, and she meets his brother and his other various family members. So I wanted someone who would be in the reader's shoes, in the sense of she is a stranger to these people, but I wanted as well someone who is a stranger to the worlds that they occupy, this world of hedge funds and Italian influences, and this kind of almost made in Chelsea-esque life. I wanted someone who was hopefully going to be very relatable. So those those traits came very quickly. The idea of, when we meet her at the beginning of the book, Robin is working behind a bar. She trained to be a journalist, but has lost a bit of sort of faith in that idea. And she's a little bit lost, and that that came to me quite quickly. But you know, you want every character. I mean, every character has to be the hero of their own story, right? So you want every character to want something and to be striving for something. And what took me a long time with Robin was working out, um, what does she want to get out of this? Like, I mean, something I like about doing standalone novels is you can really have your characters grow and develop, and you can have the courses of their lives change through the solving of this mystery in the way that you perhaps can't with a Poirot who solves crimes because it's his job, you know. And you know, what really took me a little bit of time to work out with Robin was, what is it about her that is going to change and is going to progress, and how is she going to move forward by solving this mystery? And to be honest, that didn't come until I had a full draft. And I remember sort of reaching the end of it and being very, acutely aware that I didn't have this yet. I hadn't quite sussed Robin out. And then I was working in Costa. I think we have a Costa like a couple of miles away from home where I do a lot of work. I wrote most of Murder on Lake Garda, to be honest. And I remember sitting there and it just twigging. And again, I won't say, you know, what it is that Robin wants to do, or the kind of realization that she reaches, because it's spoilerific, I guess, for part of the investigation. But I remember hitting on a way for the investigation to kind of rekindle that loss of faith, or, you know, to bring back her faith in what it is that she wanted to do and become an investigative journalist, and a way for it to be very, very personal for her. And then that really is when she became a fully three-dimensional character, not just a pair of eyes for the audience to look through and to experience this story through, but someone who is striving for something herself. So yeah, Robin, I'm really glad you like Robin, because I like Robin too. I think of the protagonists I've written across my books so far, she is probably my favorite. But yeah, she took a bit of time to work out, and but I think it works. I'm glad. I'm happy with where we got with her.
Yeah, no, I really liked her. I think she was, I mean, in a sort of a viper pit, she sort of comes out as one of the nice ones, along. And also she's really interesting because she sort of becomes, she's because of the family rivalries and the fact that Toby doesn't fit into the family like they want him to. She's immediately on the back foot with them, isn't she? So she's just like, she just wants to go in there, get the wedding over and get out of there, but because of what happens, she's not able to do that. So I thought that was really good. And I think that with the fact that there's so many rivalries and other things, I think I can say, going on within the families, the sort of family dynamics, that gives lots of red herrings as well for the reader, because there's so many things going on, and there's different people who are brought in because of different reasons. It's really hard to describe it without giving away things, but I was really intrigued at how you sort of wrote. Was that something that came in with the first draft, or is that something that you had to sort of do with edits and sort of fill out those sort of red herrings and the clues?
I think they were mostly there from the beginning. I'm just trying to think about, once my editor did sign off on that one-liner pitch with the photo, I think the idea of the various different rivalries and the different problems that people are trying to work their way through, I think most of that was there from the beginning, but it all becomes sort of more tangible and more complicated as the draft comes together, just because with all of my books so far, you write kind of like a one-pager on what the book is, and you do include a lot of kind of motives for murder in that one pager, but when you actually come to writing it up in an 80,000 word manuscript, along the way, and that's why you spend months and months working on these things, you do just happen to think sometimes, in the shower, in bed at night, you just think, oh gosh, that would be a really interesting way to take this one-liner premise I had for this character and their motive and make it way more interesting. And the idea remains broadly the same, but you just hit on ways as you go along to just deepen it and make it, as I say, more tangible, more complicated, more interesting. So yes, I think in a very basic form. A lot of the key sort of motivations and problems that people were working their way through in the book
Yeah.
were there right at the beginning, but they just become more interesting as you go along, as you spend more time with the characters and in the world. You just stumble on opportunities to stretch things a little bit further and just make it, to just bring people into the story a little bit more and just make it better, if I'm honest. And that stuff just comes with time. As I say, it just comes from being with the characters, being in the setting, being engrossed in the mystery, and having that the mechanics of the whodunit in your head for a few months at a time while you're working on that first draft. You do just stumble upon ways to just stretch it that further and make it that bit more tangible.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We've got some people saying hello. Hi. Hello, everybody. So I can't see who it is. It's probably Sarah, or it could be one of the people's names, but I can't. Somebody will probably tell me in a minute. Is there a character that you would ever return to writing about? Hint, hint, James Temple.
Do you know what? I pitched an idea for a follow-up to A Fatal Crossing.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. So I pitched an idea for the sequel at the same time as I pitched the idea for the murder game. So I presented two options for a second book, and my publisher chose the murder game. They were just more interested in going in another standalone. And to be honest, I'm kind of glad they did, because in hindsight, I think I am more interested in where the murder game went than I was in where my Fatal Crossing sequel was going to go. So I don't think I'll be going back to Temple anytime soon. Just looking at the question, is there a character you'd ever return to writing about? I guess that implies characters that I've written so far. I'm happy, to be honest, with where I have left my characters. So again, another thing I like about writing standalones as opposed to a series is you have an ending. The story has an ending. There is no to be continued, or maybe we'll pick this up again and try whatever dodgy situation it is again in a subsequent book. You just what you have, what you got is what you got, and you kind of got to think about that and then make your peace with it. And I do quite like that. So the characters I've written so far, I think I'm probably going to leave where they are. I mean, I'm working on my fourth book at the moment, and there's a part of me that is debating having Robin come back as the protagonist for book 4. I don't think I'll do that. It's an idea I'm kind of toying with, but I think it's unlikely. But I get asked occasionally, would I write a series? And the answer to that is yes. I think it just depends on the character. I think with the best series for me are the ones where you learn a little bit more about the character of each book. It's not just a case of you're going back in to spend more time with this character and solve crimes with this character because it's their job to solve crimes. You're going back and you're spending time with the character because you want to spend more time with this character. You want to learn a bit more about them, and you want to see where their life is going. And it's interesting to look at that character's life in book 5 compared to book 1 and see how they've evolved and moved along. And I'm happy with, as I say, the way my characters have evolved in their one-off books. But if one day I hit on a character who I want to explore over a series of books, then for sure I'll do a series. So it's just a case of finding that character, as I say. But I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think that's really helpful. I think definitely. I think the thing with series is that I guess you can sort of have a different crime and the person just happens to be there all the time, or you make, like you said, like a Poirot character where they're pulled in because of the crime. And I guess your settings sort of lend themselves to that. With you've got the crossing, you've got the lighthouse, and then you've got and now you've got the island. So they're all sort of lock room-ish, aren't they? So do you enjoy sort of that sort of playing with that sort of genre of the sort of the locked, I can't say room exactly because it's an island, but you know what I mean, that sort of enclosed scenario.
Yeah, I do. And again, I feel like I'm just listing things I like about standalone books. But another thing I like about standalones is that freedom to go absolutely anywhere. And to, it's both a challenge and, a really fun part of the job at the same time is thinking, okay, well, I've done, as you say, I've done a cruise liner, I've done the country house, I've now done the castle in a sunny country. Where am I going to go next? And I really enjoy that, and just finding interesting and unique ways to, as you say, to stretch that locked room formula. And I really hope that people are able to look at my back catalogue, if you like, once I've done another couple of books and say, oh, I really like the one with the castle or the one with the cruise ship. And I kind of like the idea of my books being spoken about in those sorts of terms. I think it's quite appealing, and hopefully quite different as well for readers. I like the idea that I'm probably getting a bit above my station here, but the idea of readers thinking, oh gosh, where are we going to, another, it doesn't, so I can tell you there's another book coming next year. I like the idea of readers thinking, man alive, we've done the cruise ship, we've done the country house, we've done the Italian castle, where on earth are we going next? And that I do quite like that thought. So yeah.
Well, I guess it's like the character of the place is a character as well, in a way. You've got that almost like that sort of the setting and the places, it becomes such an integral part of the book that actually you do remember them for, like you say, the country, the island, the sea. And I think also it adds to the suspense, doesn't it? The suspense of that genre, and have I just disappeared? Am I still there?
You're still there. I can see you.
Sorry, the microphone just popped up. You still there? Sorry. Yeah, still there. Sorry. So the suspension and the suspense and the tension is sort of made not easier, but it enables you to have that element in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, when it comes to, as I say, I start with my big what if question, and then I go and ask a few questions to help work out who the characters are, and then the next part is working out how the crime itself is gonna function. And a fun part of using these different locations is looking at what the characteristics of that location are and what sort of objects you might expect to find there, and what sort of little hidden nooks and crannies you might expect there, and trying to work out how they might have an influence on that investigation, so that you are hopefully coming up with a murder mystery that is unique to that location, that couldn't happen anywhere else. And not naming names, and it's only happened once or twice, but I remember being slightly disappointed by murder mysteries I've read where I think that's a really interesting location, and then you read it and it turns out actually this could have happened anywhere. You could have taken this crime and placed it in a totally different location without changing a single thing, and it would still work. And I try really hard to make sure that that is not how these feel. This murderer that takes place in Murder on Lake Garda, I hope couldn't happen in the murder game or in the one I'm writing at the moment. It is unique to this book and to this setting, and that's definitely part of the fun, trying to make that happen. Yeah,
definitely. And I think that when you've got that sort of, you've got all those elements together, that it makes much more for a really immersive reading experience with it, because there's so many things going on. You're like, oh, what's this going to go? And actually, I can't say it's a really difficult book to, apart from it's really good. I can say it's really good. It's really good. And I started reading it the other night, and I was just literally, the pages were turning, and I love that in a book, because I've got another question is, do your characters lead you where they want to go?
Yes, yeah, they do. I try. So I used to be a really rigid plotter when it came to writing my books. So with A Fatal Crossing, I genuinely had a spreadsheet that showed, because the book happens over 3 or 4 days, and I had an Excel spreadsheet with a tab for each day, and I showed by each column and each row, I'd worked out where each character was going to be at every hour of every day. And that was how I thought you write a murder mystery. And then I got about 3/4 of the way through, and I needed one of my characters to do something fairly terrible, which made sense as a bullet point in the the brief plan that I had come up with for it and I'd written down for it. But the character I'd just written over the course of 60,000 words or so at this point in prose just wouldn't do it. This it just didn't make sense, and so I had to backtrack and sort of rethink the end of my end of my story to accommodate this character who suddenly didn't fit the bullet point he was meant to enact. So with each of my books now, I've become much less rigid with the way I plot them out, and I'm much happier to let my characters sort of go where they need to go. So usually,
Yeah.
I always know who's going to be murdered.
Yeah.
I know there are some fantastic crime writers who I only say who the murderer is as well. I know there's some fantastic writers who set out without knowing who the murderer is, and they kind of solve the investigation as they're writing it. I can't do that. I need to know who the murderer is, and I need to have a few kind of touch points along the way, so a few key clues that will help, or that will be required to unmask the murderer at the end. But other than that, I'm quite happy now just to ramble a little bit and just to fill in the gaps between those touch points as I go, and that is absolutely character led. And sometimes, as we've as we discussed earlier with Robin, sometimes I'll get to the end of a full draft and think, okay, I know who this character is now, and I'll go back and I'll make some changes throughout. Maybe not big changes, not the identity of the murderer or whatever, but I might rewrite certain chapters in the knowledge of who that character is, knowledge I didn't have before, and I had to spend some time with them and work out who they were in order to get to that point. So yeah, I try and sort of lead them in a certain direction, but yes, my characters do I do try to let them go off on their own, because otherwise I think they just feel forced. If you get to a point where you can clearly see a character is just doing something because the plot needs them to, as opposed to because it feels like a natural thing to do, then, well, I guess you just never want to get to that point. So yes, I try and shimmy them in the right direction, but I'm quite happy to let my characters do what it is that they need to do.
I guess as well, if you don't, that it will feel, I don't know whether it just doesn't feel right to you if you think, right, no, you're not doing that, I don't want you to do that.
Yeah.
So that's the whole part of like the creativeness of like, it's sort of your sort of creativity coming out and going, right, okay, well, let's and I guess as you get to know them more, they become more unwieldy as well, because in the beginning you might not know them that well, but as you get to know them more, they become more sort of rounded, and I guess I think that's they become more people-y, like.
I think what I find really interesting, actually, as you spend time with them, is the relationships between the characters that you hadn't really considered before. So, for instance, I knew from the beginning that Lawrence and Toby, the two brothers in the story, were going to have a difficult relationship. So that was there already. But then it occurred to me very late, quite late in the editing process, actually, that, oh, do you know what? If they have a difficult relationship, that probably means Toby and Lawrence's best man, his old school friend, they probably have quite a fractious relationship as well, because there might be some resentment there on Toby's part for the fact that Lawrence and this guy get on well enough that he's made him his best man. There might be a bit of awkwardness there on the part of the best man, that he has been chosen over the brother potentially. So yeah, it's things like that you just don't, as I say, you don't think about that when you're putting together your one pager to pitch the book to an editor. But as you spend time with these characters and you get to know them, I can remember having that thought about that particular relationship just out on a walk. I think I was walking up to Asda one day, and as I went, it occurred to me, actually, do you know what? There's potential for something really interesting here between these two characters. And then you realize, oh, there's a scene, quite an important scene with those two characters towards the end of the book. I can go back and I can make that more interesting now, having had this thought of, oh, these characters actually have quite an interesting relationship that hadn't occurred to me earlier. So yes, it's the relationships with the characters that that I find really interesting. And those things do just come with time. As we've said,
Yeah.
time in the setting, time in the characters, time in the story. So, yeah, that's the stuff I find really interesting.
I've got a couple more questions that have come in. Do you have
Mm.
any book events this year? Sarah's asking. We'll do that
Yep.
one first.
Yeah, let's do that.
Um,
So I have a couple coming up actually. So next week I am going to be in Staines and I'm going to be in Oxford, doing events at their local branches of Waterstones, which is going to be great. And then I think later in the year, I can't remember when off the top of my head, but I'm coming up to Merseyside. I'm going to be appearing at a lovely independent bookshop up in the northwest, and I'm doing an event in Birmingham as well, the big Waterstones in Birmingham. So, and there'll be more. There are always more. So if you're up for any of those or you're interested, keep an eye on my Instagram and on my Twitter, because I try to publicize those as much as I can. But in the immediate short term, it'll be next week in Oxford or Staines.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, that's really good. And yeah, I mean, this sort of festivals and things are coming up as the year goes on, so I'm sure you'll be popping up around those as well. I've also got a question. Any advice for us budding writers? So I guess as you know, you've had have you had a book every year, haven't you, for the last 3 years? Am I right in saying that, or was there a gap? Yeah, no, yeah, it was right. Yeah, so that's quite intense, and you're writing book 4 at the moment. So are you writing full time now? Have you finished your sort of? I think the last time we spoke, you were still working in your day job, sort of thing. So and you were juggling that. So you're full-time writer now.
So yes, I've stepped away from the day job now. I take on some freelance copywriting work. So I usually do an hour or two a day of the odd jobs. I do social media copy and thought leadership articles and the odd white paper and that sort of thing. So I still do a little bit of that, but yeah, I'm on my own now. So I've stepped away from the office and I'm pretty much writing full time, which is wonderful. I mean, as for the advice for budding writers, I don't know, it's a very big question, depending on which part of the process you're in. I don't know, where do you reckon we should start with that?
I think maybe how you sort of got started, maybe for people who haven't sort of, we said that you've had 3 books in 3 years. So that's quite a journey. So how did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, well, it started a long time ago, actually. So, I mean, the idea for A Fatal Crossing came to me when I was about 16, 17, and it was initially going to be a play. So I was in sixth form at the time, and I had a bunch of pals who were also into writing and drama and music and performing and all that sort of stuff. And I really liked the idea of writing something we could put on together. And A Fatal Crossing was going to be that. And I remember I'd never written a play before. I didn't really know how to do it. And I think I got halfway through it and then we all finished school and went off to university. and that was that. It lived on a memory stick for a good few years. But I think when I was about 24, 25, my stepsister gave me a copy of Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz for Christmas. And I remember reading it, and for those who don't know, it's a book of 2 halves, and it's an incredible book. I'm sure lots of people listening have read it. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? But the first half is very kind of Agatha Christie, Midsummer Murders. The vicar's been murdered on the day of the vegetable competition kind of vibe. And I'd never read any Agatha Christie at this point. This was my first real introduction to proper golden age crime writing. And I remember reading it and just thinking, oh my goodness, with a few adjustments, this is what A Fatal Crossing could be. And I dug out those my old notes and the pages I had written of the script. And I remember I was doing it around my day job. I did I remember I used to work on Monday and Wednesday evenings, which was when my wife went out for a gym class and I was home, and I would use that time to write, and Saturday and Sunday mornings as well, because I was always up first, so I'd have an hour or two to myself to have a cup of tea and do some writing. So that was when I wrote it, and it took me 2 years. I think I started in the January and I finished it the following November. and yeah, at the time it was a hobby. It was a bit of fun, It was I'd done some research just as I was getting started into the process of getting an agent, and so I knew the whole way through how incredibly competitive that would be. So every time I opened my laptop and I sat down to work on A Fatal Crossing, I said to myself, this is just for me. This is just a bit of fun. It's probably not going to be published, so just enjoy it while you can. That was genuinely what was going through my head every time I sat down to write. And then I finished it, and I did send it to some agents, and I think I sent it to 10 agents, and one of them replied to say no. 8 of them didn't reply, and one of them replied to say yes. And that was that, and that was just before the pandemic. That was January 2020. So that was 4 years ago now. And here we are 3 books later with a 4th one on the way.
And so would you, I guess, on that sort of advice, for anybody sort of looking, because I guess an agent is important for sort of like looking for really to make that next step. Once you've written, obviously writing it is quite important.
Yeah.
But I guess it's that discipline as well of, trying to fit it in around other things. And just, I think you said there about writing it for yourself. I think that probably is quite important for the first book, because you don't know where it's going to go, do you? So
you don't. No, and I genuinely didn't think anything was going to happen with it. Like, I was prepared to have a good go. I'd looked into the process, and I was eager to try, but I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if it's going to get picked up, and when it did, that was a surprise. It was a genuine surprise. I mean, my advice to anyone in that sort of part of the process is do as much research as you can into how to submit to an agent, which agents you want to go to. One of the things I did was I went to a talk being given by an agent on how to get an agent. And, that was incredibly helpful. I mean, one of the things that really shone through for me there is that people spend years working on a book and then 5 minutes looking into how to submit to an agent, and they submit to any agent whose email address they can get, regardless of whether that agent is going to be interested in their book. If the agent works in their genre or not. They send half-hearted, copied and pasted query letters, and if you can not do that stuff, if you can go to the effort of working out who are the agents that are representing authors writing things that are in the same genre as you, and if you can put together a brilliant query letter, and the best advice I've heard on how to write sort of a submission letter to an agent is you've got to write the sales pitch that they will use to sell your book to a publisher. So you've got to talk about essentially in Waterstones, if your book is on the buy one get one half price table and someone picks up your book, what is the half price book they're going to get as well? Where is it going to sit on the shelf? In what section of the shop? Who are they going to be next to on the shelf? Well, that's not a good question, actually, because they do it alphabetically, don't they? But the point remains, if you can go to the effort of researching that stuff and finding an agent who works in your field, and you can say to them, this is why I'm approaching you personally, and this is my book, this is going to be its place in the world, in the bookshop. This is the market for it, these are the people who are going to buy it, these are the authors who are doing similar things. If you can do all of that, you will be leagues ahead of a lot of the other people trying to get their books in front of an agent. So just go to the effort of doing all that stuff. If you've spent 2 years like I did writing your first book, put a similar amount of effort into preparing your pitch for an agent, because it will pay off, and it will help you to stand out above and against the other people who are trying.
I think that's really good advice, because there's so many books that are sent in every year, it is really competitive. So you've got to stand out. So that's really good advice for anybody who's, Brilliant. Has spent all that time. Sarah's asking, do you have a favorite author? I was going to ask you that, so she's beaten me to it, but that's absolutely fine. Do you have a favorite author?
Yeah, I probably got several, but I mean, I guess the first one that comes to mind, and anyone who's heard me speaking before will probably have heard me say this, but it's Anthony Horowitz. You know, and I think for the sole
Mm.
reason that I think he is one of the only authors I can think of who I've genuinely read for most of my life. So, I mean, the first book I ever bought with my own pocket money was an Alex Rider book. You know, I read
Oh,
the Alex Riders all through my childhood and my teens, and I read his other books as well. So, like, he wrote a great series which weren't, they weren't as well known as the Alex Riders. They're called the Diamond Brothers books, and they were about a hapless private detective and his incredibly intelligent kid brother, and they used to solve crimes together. And I remember enjoying those. And then, now as an adult, I read, the Magpie Murders. I read the Hawthorne series. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
I love the
it's
Hawthorne series.
oh, the Hawthorns are great. They really are good.
They are,
And
yeah, they are really good.
and as I say, it was while reading Magpie Murders that I set up and thought, I'm going to write a book. And, one of my prized possessions is I went to bloody Scotland for the first time in 2022. And he was there. And I took that copy of Magpie Murders and I got him to sign it for me. So that is
Oh,
lovely.
wow.
Yeah. But yes, I've probably got several favorite authors, as I'm sure we all do. But that is the first one that comes to mind. Yeah.
A question that I hadn't planned to ask you, but it really intrigued me when you were talking about it, was your own wedding. And now I'm sort of asking myself, when you were planning your wedding, were you planning the murder book at were you planning Murder on Lake Garda? Was there anything like on your wedding day, were you able to switch off from?
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was not thinking about Murder on Lake Garda on my wedding day. No,
As
that was
you.
yeah, I was taking a day off. But my wife does quite frequently like to point out how dodgy it was that I was writing Murder on Lake Garda
Yeah.
while we were getting ready to get married ourselves, and likes to tell other people as well how dodgy that looks. So I think there's a reference to it in the acknowledgements at the end. It was a coincidence. As I tell everyone, this is my father's head. The money was resting in my account line. It was a coincidence. We're in Lake Garda in May, and we happened to see this wedding taking place, and we got married the September of that year. It was not planned, but no, I wasn't thinking about Murder on Lake Garda on my wedding day. No,
I'm really pleased about that, and I think, but obviously, I had my wedding was only 5 years ago, so I remember like planning things, and I guess all those things are useful because actually there's a lot of research you don't have to do because you're doing it, you're living that research. So
yeah.
because I guess with your books, there are I imagine there were elements of the research that you needed to do for the book. Was there anything that sort of threw up any surprises for you when you were doing the sort of research?
Any surprises? Let me think. I mean, as you say, I didn't need to do a huge amount for this one because, as I say, we were already in sort of a wedding-y. I was in a wedding-y headspace myself already, so that was helpful. And then, as I say, I had the idea for the story while we were actually out there, so I was able to pay attention to things that are happening around us, and make note of things that could come into the book from a sort of scene setting and environmental perspective. There was some some funny translation issues. So there is the odd Italian phrase that pops up in the book, and I have a lovely Italian friend who I was able to get in touch with on Facebook and ask if she wouldn't mind checking my translations, and I got some of them very wrong. So yeah, that was probably the closest I got to some surprises in the research. I mean, I had to do some interesting research on the mafia. So I mean, slightly spoilerific, but the mafia do make a small appearance in this because it's Italy, of course.
I was going to say, you have to, don't you? It's like obligatory to have the mafia.
It is obligatory. It's a crime novel set in Italy. You've got to have the mafia pop up. The mafia does pop up briefly, and I did some interesting research into the mafia and learned some interesting things about the kind of national mafia task force that exists in Italy and that sort of. So there was some interesting research to be done, but not a huge amount for this one.
Do you did you ever sort of end up falling down rabbit holes of research? You know, when you sort of start delving into the mafia, is it
Yeah.
sometimes you have to sort of go right? I'm not going to spend 5 hours looking at all the different things.
I mean, the most significant rabbit hole I've probably fallen down was last summer. I took myself to the Arctic Circle for a week to research Book 4. I went to a place called Svalbard, which, for those who
Oh,
don't
that's
know,
it. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, this
Philip
time last
Pullman.
year, I didn't know. I'd never heard of it. But like you go. So the way you get there, you fly from Gatwick to Oslo. You fly from Oslo to a place called Tromsø, which is right at the very top of Norway, like the top of mainland Norway. And you go on another plane and you fly 2 hours north again to an island called Svalbard. It is where you will find the world's northernmost permanent settlement. There are polar bears, there are glaciers, there are whales, and it features a little bit in Book 4. And I remember, I mean, look, I'd never been to Scandinavia before, let alone to Svalbard. So I was looking at pictures and I was looking at videos and I was reading blogs on it, just trying to get a feel for the place. And it was just so incredibly alien to me that I think I remember saying to my wife on a day in June, I think I need to go to Svalbard. and she said, "Well,
Like you
you're
do.
not." Yeah, as you do. She said, "Well, I'm not coming with you." And fortunately, an old mate of mine who I lived with at uni came with me. And 2 months later, we were in Svalbard and we spent a fantastic week up there. But that's probably the most out there thing I've done in the name of researching a book. And as rabbit, I don't know if it counts as a rabbit hole, just
Quite
deciding.
a big.
But yeah.
So can you tell us anything about Book 4?
I mean, I guess that it's set in Svalbard is probably about as much as I want to say right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's another whodunit. It's another standalone. It's another contemporary piece, and yeah, the fact that it's taking place within the Arctic Circle probably suggests it's going to be quite different to Murder on Lake Garda. We are going from sunny Italy to one of the coldest, most remote places in the world. So yeah, it's a big shift again, and I'm editing it at the moment. It exists. There's a lot of work still to be done on it, but yeah, there is a version that exists, and I'm working away on it now, and I'm excited to hear what people think of it. I think it's coming out this time next year. They seem to be coming out every January. So yeah, we've got a bit of a wait on our hands, but I hope people will like it when the time comes.
No, I mean, well, so Murder on Lake Garda is out tomorrow. No, not tomorrow. I'm on the wrong day. It's Thursday. Yeah, the 18th. So yeah, so we'll have to, and then that'll be the hardback, and then the paperback will probably be another. Is that yours going about a year, or are they 6 months?
About 6 months. It should be sometime over the summer.
Yeah. Nice, perfect summer read. Nice murder in a sunny Italy.
I hope so. Yeah.
Sarah's asking, what would your Google search say about you? I take that from a research point of view.
Yeah. Well, let's assume. What would it say about me? I mean, with this fourth one, there would probably be an awful lot of. Do you know what? I try not to do that much Google research just because I worry about getting things wrong, which I know sounds silly, but anyone can put anything on the internet. I try where possible to find experts who I can speak to, and if needed, to make things up. Or to go to places myself, like to Lake Garda or to the North Pole. So yeah, I don't do a huge amount of Google research. I'm quite lucky. Like, I've got a few medical people in the family. So my brother is training to be a paramedic. My stepsister works in a hospital. She's a radiologist. I have some people around me with medical knowledge who I can WhatsApp and say, if someone were to die in this way, what would their body look like after 12 hours? So it's probably my WhatsApp conversations that look dodgy from my Google search history. And sometimes, I feel the need when I'm WhatsApping my brother and saying, I want to kill someone in this way. How would it look? How would it feel? How would it smell? I do usually feel the need to put in brackets, this is for a book.
This is for my book, yeah.
Yes, this is work. So it's probably my WhatsApp messages that that are going to get me in trouble before my Google search history.
Luckily, you've got a good alibi with your writing. So
yeah, well, yeah.
I'm just seeing that we're coming up to the end. Is there anything you've read recently that you'd like to recommend to everybody listening this evening?
Yeah, so I'm working through Rob Thorogood's Marlowe Murder Club mysteries at the moment. So I'm doing an event with Rob. Actually, Rob's going to be at the Staines event next week. So we that I do in Waterstones and Staines. So we are going to be on a panel together being interviewed. And then at the beginning of February, he is coming to Oxford and I'm interviewing him as part of a panel. All about murder mysteries. So I'm seeing Rob a couple of times in the next few weeks. So I'm working my way through his Marlowe Murder Club mysteries at the moment. I'm a good way into the second one right now, and I'm having a good time with that. I love Death in Paradise and his work on that sort of stuff. So yeah, he's a good guy. What else have I read? I read the Ink Black Heart over Christmas. In the latest in the Strike series, which all 1,100 pages of it, or however stupidly large they are at the moment, and I was suitably impressed by that. So yeah, I've been lucky to read some pretty good stuff recently.
So you tend to read the same genre as you write, because sometimes people will sort of avoid reading
I go through phases, to be honest. Like sometimes murder mysteries are kind of all I read, and sometimes I will go completely off piste and read some fantasy or a courtroom drama or just something, or some sci-fi or just something, or a ghost story. I like ghost stories. I really, really love ghost stories.
Yeah, I like ghost stories.
Yeah, they are great, aren't they? I'd love to write one day. But yeah, so I go through phases. Sometimes I'm just head down in murder mystery after murder mystery, and sometimes I just need to read something else. I mean, I tend to find, I think I do my best writing when I'm reading something that really excites me, but that doesn't have to be a murder mystery. It can be, so long as it's a great story that just gets me excited about reading and excited about going back to my own story. It just, as long as it's a great story, that's all I need.
That's all we all need, I think. That's why we're here. That's what we're
trying
all
times. Yeah.
Yeah, we all need a good murder. We all need a good story. And so just to remind you that Murder on Lake Garda is out on Thursday, and Tom's other books, I'll pop up in the chat afterwards, the other books, if you've not read Tom before, because A Fatal Crossing and The Murder Game are both really good murder mysteries as well. I've loved them all. So, well, hopefully you can pop on when I'm really interested to read book 4 now, so I'm going to have to wait. So if you can be quick and write that one, that would be great, and then you can come back on and talk to us about book 4.
I would love to. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're back tomorrow night with Kaz. I can't remember who we're with, but it will be on the page. So if you're interested, come along. We'd love to see you. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Tom. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.